Hi everyone, I'm Parag with Webgility. This video is being recorded as part of our series called Beat It. I'm talking to entrepreneurs and experts in retail on how they're beating COVID-19. Today, I'm excited to chat with Vishal Wather. He's an e-commerce veteran and fellow entrepreneur. He ran an agency called Atmosol for over a decade, helping Amazon sellers grow online. After exiting that business, he worked with a couple of other startups, and earlier this year, he joined as VP of e-commerce for an accessories brand called Reshoevn8r. I should also mention that Vishal is my buddy from college, and we've known each other for about 22 years. But today, we're going to keep it really professional. So welcome, Vishal.
We'll try.
Yes, we'll
Thanks,
certainly
Parag. Appreciate it.
Great. Welcome to today's show. First and foremost, we're going to be talking about coronavirus, certainly, and the impact that it's had on your business. But tell me a little bit more about what is Reshoevn8r, who's your target audience, where you guys sell. Just give the audience a little bit of an overview about the business, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So Reshoevn8r is a premium shoe cleaning and shoe care brand. Our target audience primarily are definitely sneakerheads. And anyone really that cares about their sneakers and their shoes and wants to make sure that they're kept clean and pristine, and make sure that they're able to show them off, when they're stepping out with their shoes and take pride in what they have as far as their sneaker collection goes.
That's pretty cool.
So yeah, I mean that's generally the high level overview in terms of what our products are.
Excellent. So I imagine coronavirus has had an impact on your business, but before we talk a little bit about the impact, did you see sort of the coronavirus coming? Can you give us a sense of the sort of the timeline that you applied for your business? Anything you did to prepare?
No, we definitely didn't see it coming, especially here in Arizona. I feel like on the onset, while things were brewing in other parts of the country, Arizona, I felt like was a little more on the lax side, obviously based on the numbers and the stats, right? Which I know that there's a lot to be said there in terms of like accuracy, but nevertheless, initially the numbers and the stats were definitely on the down low. And so with that said, we were, there wasn't as much concern as obviously in hindsight, they could have, should have, done a bunch of things. But, it definitely hit us with a surprise, right? In terms of like, just within a couple of days, we started seeing a lot of sales decline on multiple channels that we sell on, right? So, it definitely hit us with a surprise, much like I imagine, probably happened with a bunch of other retailers.
And just to sort of rewind the tapes here a little, we talking March, February? When did you start to see a change in business?
Late February, I would say probably mid-February.
Okay. And is your brand selling only through its own kind of e-commerce channel? Do you also sell on Amazon? Can you talk a little bit about the channels that you have? And also, do you do any retail?
We do not do retail yet. We are on, we have our Shopify store. That's our primary, bread and butter, if you will. And then, yeah, we definitely have a bunch of different channels in terms of, marketplaces. So Amazon being the majority of the share in terms of the other channels. And then a little bit of here and there in terms of like, eBay and stuff like that.
Okay. And since you didn't kind of see this coming once, pretty much most people didn't, but once you sort of realized that there was going to be an impact on business, can you share a little bit of kind of what are some actions you took in order to combat what could be kind of a pretty significant decline?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to summarize the areas of, areas that we had to tackle, right? Like, so first of all, obviously on our primary storefront, Shopify store, revenues and conversions just started like, doing a nosedive. Amazon revenue was pretty much wiped out at the onset of like, especially when things started picking up in terms of the cases in the US. We had almost non-existent revenue from Amazon, and that was because FBA was prioritizing only essential items. So we took a big hit there just on the Amazon channel. And then essentially those being the two major areas of our, of our sales channels. Immediately the steps that we took were on our Amazon account. We definitely switched from FBA to FBM, which is fulfilled by merchant. So we were lucky enough with that we didn't rely solely on Amazon in terms of like Amazon FBA with regards to our inventory and warehousing. We definitely have a few other areas, warehouses that we're basically, stocking up and have inventory located in. And therefore we were able to just kind of make that switch really quickly and easily and start fulfilling even the Amazon orders, from those other channels. So that's as far as Amazon goes. In other areas, we just took a look at our business as a whole and started doing a lot of cost-cutting measures, as I imagine, most businesses probably did and are doing. So review all the vendor relationships, ask for discounts. There's no shame in going back to existing accounts and vendors and being like, hey, look, we've been hit and we're in this together. So, can we get a break on certain things? Try to renegotiate some of the terms. If you've got a purchase order, try to renegotiate the, net 30, 60, 90 terms or whatever you have in place and delay those payments if you can. So those are some of the areas that we started paying a lot of attention on. And so as an example, we did an inventory of like a bunch of different apps that we have on our Shopify store, right? And vendors that are integrated and connected to those. One example that I can give is, we've got this I'm not going to name any vendors, right? But essentially we've got a fraud protection company plugged in, and they take a pretty decent chunk of the revenue, to offer that fraud protection service. Well, after doing some quick analysis, we realized we didn't have that much of fraud that needed to be protected against. Like net, even if we didn't have that in place, we probably wouldn't lose, that much money that compared to like what we were paying them, right?
Sure.
So that's just a quick example. I mean, that was, definitely still like in the six figures, with regards to what we saved annually, right? So that was a quick one. It's like, all right, well, let's not have that in place. Instead, we leveraged a bunch of like automations. Like, so for example, we had like Shopify's, fraud protection, fraud detection, sorry, that's already built into Shopify. And we had those orders be slacked to us automatically in terms of like, hey, here's a Slack message on this fraud channel. And then my customer service team was able to like look at that and then mitigate those issues like as soon as we saw those messages coming in, as an example.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, a couple of things that stand out to me from your comment there. One, it seems like having that diverse sort of portfolio across channels. So having your Shopify, Amazon, and multiple channels. When Amazon changed its rules on you, certainly led to a decline, but you were able to maybe adapt and be able to do, fulfill yourself. Diversification is something that I've heard time and time again in a lot of these conversations I've had, is that the more diversified you are, the more prepared you are to kind of pull those toggles. And sounds like you also had the capacity and the infrastructure to be able to do fulfillment in-house, which is pretty challenging for a lot of merchants who are locked into an FBA model, maybe shipping even directly from outside of the US. So to just get a sense of magnitude here, can you share in terms of just percentages, maybe what sort of decline you had in revenue or volume, and have you since making those changes been able to recover, or what sort of changes are you seeing in some of those key metrics?
Yeah, I would say, as far as the decline goes, and there's an interesting story I want to share with regards to this whole thing, right? In terms of like how things kind of collided in terms of our worlds with regards to what we've been working on. So I'll share that in a minute here because it's very relevant to the numbers, and the metrics that you're asking about. But essentially, prior to March 30th, we were probably down by about, I want to say about 30 to 40%, just, in general, right? Like across the board. On Amazon, obviously, it was percentage-wise on Amazon itself was a lot higher. Like when you take into account just the Amazon revenue per se. But that said, a couple of pointers here, right? One is, definitely diversify. We don't have more than like, I would say probably about 20% of our revenue is probably dependent on Amazon. I would not advise anybody to be anywhere beyond that dependent on Amazon in terms of like just, as one of your channels. That's probably a good number to kind of focus on as far as diversification goes. So I think that helped a lot because we just kind of de-risked ourselves, right? From that perspective, it's like the most 20%, which is not insignificant, but nevertheless, the most that we would have lost out on is 20%, and we did.
Sure.
So that's that in terms of like the initial decline. The reason why March 30th is very important in this whole equation for us, at least, is that we've been working on a rebrand for 2 years. And this is such an amazing story that I just feel like, it's one of those things where I'm not very spiritual, but I just feel like the universe and the everything just kind of like came together for us in a certain sense. And this is a positive takeaway from this whole situation. But yeah, I mean, for 2 years, we've been working on this rebrand initiative, and everything was different, is different now about the brand, right? In terms of like packaging and the products and, the website, et cetera. All of that initiative that had been put together for the last 2 years, we essentially launched this rebrand on March 30th in the midst of all this stuff happening, in the midst of this pandemic.
That's a bold move, but perhaps one, necessary one, given, there's not a lot of choices out there, right? Like it's great that it all just sort of culminated at the right time.
Exactly. I mean, speaking of choices, I mean, one issue was that we didn't have that much inventory of our old SKUs. So we've got to launch, you know what I mean? Like we've got to do what we planned on doing. And now we're sitting on new inventory, that needs to go, right? So all of that put together with the fact that we were just like, look, not the best time given, the pandemic and, just the economy and whatever's happening. But we're like, hey, we got to do this. First of all, we don't have too many options. And secondly, we were all actually really excited about it. And amongst this whole pandemic, this whole situation that was happening, it really brought our team together. So I thought that was just, it couldn't have been better, right? In terms of like making sure there's unity within the team to focus on this unified goal of this new brand, this new website, the new SKUs, the new messaging, et cetera, right? So that was just incredible on its own in terms of like leading up to that. Then we launch, and over the next few weeks of our launch, we saw a drastic increase in revenue. The average order value, skyrocketed essentially. Like from that nosedive, we started seeing it kind of going uphill.
Wow, that's fantastic.
From that perspective. Yeah, it was such a great time for us to rejoice from that perspective. Our CEO sent an amazing letter of hope and business continuity and unity to our customers. Just in the midst of all this, like we need good stories, right? And this was definitely one of them.
That's right. That's right.
Parag, I noticed that we had such an amazing brand following and fanatic customers. That
I should point out, I believe you have, I believe your YouTube channel has over 1 million subscribers.
Yep, that's right, and growing. So, the customers are so fanatic about the brand that they actually repurchased, even though I saw like a bunch of them had purchased like the old SKUs, but they're like, we need our hands on the new SKUs. We need our hands on the rebrand, and it's also based on them just wanting to support us, right? We're still a small business here in Arizona, and they just love the brand, and there's a whole community around it. We call them it's a Reshoevn8r is what we call it. But this whole community, I mean, they really helped from that perspective, and people re-upped on our new brand. So that was just incredible to see that spike.
That's fantastic. So is it safe to say then that you've kind of, gotten past the hurdle now and you're back to your previous revenue levels, or are you seeing in fact an increase from there onwards?
Yeah, I would say we're back to where we were, maybe a little bit of an increase, but that little bit of an increase to our prior revenue and conversion rate is probably because of what's happening with regards to the checks that are coming in right now, the stimulus checks.
Yeah.
So because of the stimulus checks, we're, across the board, just in retail, there's a spike. So Anyway, that's
for
definitely a positive spin.
context. It's April 20th today. The check started rolling in last week, and yes, it's something we're seeing across our customer base, and also through a lot of merchants that I've talked to. They're starting to see pretty significant increases in volume. It sounds like the shock factor of the coronavirus and all the lockdowns is finally we're getting past that, and maybe we're starting to look at the light at the end of the tunnel. There is an acceleration. I, in fact, just posted earlier today on LinkedIn a stat. We saw about a 54% increase last week in order volume compared to the first week of January. So we're starting to see an acceleration as consumer behavior changes towards a move towards online. That's fantastic news. And I think in terms of the rebrand that you just talked about, something that's also stood out in other conversations I've had is brands finding kind of creative ways during this pandemic and utilizing sort of this time to fuel either a rebrand, to kind of double down if they have the funding available to accelerate on new ideas and strategies. So I'm sure this rebrand took up most of your capacity, but are there some other creative things that you're doing right now to sort of fight and kind of overcome this downturn, especially given your brand and your business is unfortunately it falls in what's being termed as kind of a non-essential category, but it's fantastic that you're able to see that growth. Any other creative ideas you have that you're currently employing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how creative it is per se, but obviously the general things along the lines of like fire up other channels if you haven't been already, because if Amazon is like deprioritizing your non-essentials, then go into eBay more so than you have before. There's still demand. Here's the important thing, right? There's still demand out there, which is obviously very clear based on the spike in e-commerce sales as soon as these like stimulus checks hit, right? So there's still demand out there. People want to spend. So get in front of them via other channels, right? Via other areas that you may not have done before. So eBay is one. Try to get localized. So like Facebook Shop or OfferUp, right? Like OfferUp is like very localized, and you can like inject ads in there and just inject your products in there. So that's another way of like getting in front of customers. With regards to us specifically, the rebrand was great also in the sense that we were actually able to capture other demographic that we previously had not. So as an example, and I'm saying this is what we did, but my message here is that try to figure out how to capture other demographic, right? Like try to capture other audiences that you may not have considered or may not have been targeting previously. But for us, as an example, again, everything just came together so well in the sense that our rebrand was supposed to be much more on the neutral side to appeal to a broader audience, even though the sneakerhead community is our primary audience, but we wanted to appeal to more broader segments and audiences. So as an example, prior to the rebrand, our ratio of male to female audiences was about 4-1. After rebrand, we are at 2-1.
Wow.
Like that's a huge spike in terms of women that are interested in our products now. And along with that, even the age group, right? So we used to be at between 18 to 34 as far as the majority of the audience that that were buying from us. Now, after the rebrand, we're at 18 to 54.
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah.
Again, just by doing that, we have captured additional markets that we didn't have access to before. And now we're able to leverage that as far as like, just think about the lifetime value from all these new customers that we've acquired. Speaking of acquiring customers, the cost of customer acquisition is, in my opinion, at an all-time low, because we're seeing that you can afford a lot more than before to spend money on Google Ads, Facebook, just like light up those channels and fire those things up, Instagram, like all these channels, because there's definitely companies that are not able to spend money on those channels, right? But if you've got the funds, then spend that money and time in acquiring your customers today, because your cost of customer acquisition is lower, I should say, and the lifetime value of those customers is going to pay back umpteenth amount of times, down the road in the long term of this whole thing.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, no, you touched upon some pretty critical factors here. One is, the ability to test a lot of different marketing campaigns and ideas, because kind of advertising broadly is on the decline. You have the ability to spend less but target new audiences. It does sound like your business has the sophistication with both Shopify and a lot of the behind the scenes tools you've likely put in place to measure a lot of these detailed demographics. And so having that level of analytics, and something that of course I'm sort of very passionate about, is knowing and having control over your detailed insights about your business so you can kind of take critical action. I think that's really key. um, since you are, again, a more mature, I would say, business, and I think very fortunate to have both diversification and a much smaller kind of physical footprint without any retail locations. Um, I wonder if you think about kind of a retailer out there that maybe hasn't started selling online yet. In your opinion, like, what do you think is now a good time to fire up that e-commerce store? And if so, like, what would be some advice that you might give to a brick and mortar retailer that's perhaps in a more dire situation and really needs to find a way out?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say, if they have the assets, if they have the funding available, uh, obviously, physical retail right now is just not in a good place. There's no foot traffic, so to speak, right? So that's a lot of money and real estate that is not being put to use per square foot. If they can, I mean, I don't want to prescribe people shutting down, right? It depends on each person's situation, but uh, I would say redirect a lot of that funding, a lot of that money towards spinning up your online store. Definitely a fan of Shopify because of just the ease of use and the vast like app marketplace that you can do a lot with. That would be my advice, very specifically, which is to redirect a lot of that funding, get an online store up and running, uh, start start focusing on customer acquisition strategies across the board. So social media, SEO, Google, pay-per-click, fire up all those channels, like whatever money you're spending on, your local physical retail presence, all of that should be redirected to all of these online channels, marketplaces, as well as, ad networks, and get those customers, acquire those customers is really going to be my key message here. And then on your website, be fanatical about customer service. If you've got a little chatbot thing, don't wait till someone clicks on it. You can definitely have something in place where if someone's been on your site for more than like 60 seconds or something like that, like you initiate this chatbot, initiate and say, how can I help you? What can I consult you on with regards to whatever the product is, right? And that engagement is going to, again, pay back in massive returns by having that customer that prospect being a paying customer today, as well as that lifetime value of that customer.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the key to spinning up online, of course, there's a number of choices, and we talk about this in another video. But yeah, Shopify is definitely a key winner here. In fact, their stock and the traffic to Shopify stores is at all-time highs right now, with all of the momentum that they're seeing with these channels. If I go a little bit to sort of the behind the scenes, you think about the physical operation, because retailers really are very much those folks that like to touch and feel their product and work closely face to face with their customers. I want to ask about two things. One, in terms of procurement, in terms of the manufacturing side, uh, do you guys manufacture locally? Do you import from international locations? If you could talk a little bit about that. And also in terms of fulfillment, now that you're kind of balancing away from FBA to in-house, any pointers you might have for retail businesses now getting started? Is this the time to consider kind of reaching out to China, to other markets, or thinking manufacturing locally? And are there things happening with China that you might be aware of? Any things you can highlight in terms of both manufacturing and the fulfillment side?
Yeah, absolutely. So with regards to manufacturing, yes, we manufacture internationally. Uh, Again, just going back to the whole universe, coming together and like everything just kind of fitting in this whole chaos. We got lucky that our our shipment of the brand new SKUs right before we launched, we're already in. Like we got in on like one of the last shipments. I feel like
Wow.
uh, before there was a whole cutoff in terms of that supply chain. So we were good, at least for our launch. Now obviously we need to replenish now, and so we're getting back into it in terms of like that reorder. But China's open. Like from what I'm seeing and from all the signs I'm seeing, China's already opened up as an example. And so a lot of these other places in terms of like just getting products out. So we're I think I don't think there's a concern from that perspective for us. And like I said, we got lucky right before everything hit. With regards to fulfillment, I want to clarify we do have a 3PL, so it's not in-house per se.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, my advice there is, again, de-risk in terms of, if you've got a good company you're working with, then de-risk in terms of making sure they have at least 2 warehouses, spread apart, because again, you just never know what might happen. Maybe one goes offline because of the virus, or other disasters. Like I feel like all the other disasters and other issues have been like pushed aside because of COVID, but there's other stuff happening. Like there's like earthquakes still happening. There's hurricanes still happening, right? Like,
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
and
Yep.
if,
It's
if
just
that
having
that
that
happens, like,
diversification.
exactly. So we've done that, and that's definitely helped us significantly. And again, the sophistication with the systems in place needs to be there, where we're able to do that, right? We're able to just kind of flip the switch in terms of like, all right, well, based on the inventory that's available or not available in certain places, we're able to just kind of reroute the order automatically, versus having to like manually reconcile and be like, okay, well, we can't ship from there, so now let's go ahead and shift this order over there, etc. So we're definitely able to do a lot of those things on the back end with the different platforms we're using.
Nice, nice. And it has sounds like, again, timing has been sort of serendipitous for you, even though it's very unfortunate for about what's happening for so many businesses out there. Of course, I will
Yep.
say that it's great to hear these positive stories amidst all the crap that's going on. Um, has this pandemic and the impact sort of changed anything like fundamentally about the way you operate your business? Are you thinking differently as a company about the future? Are there some takeaways that you can share about the future and how it's affecting your thought process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for one, clearly, it's made everyone remote working experts, right? And we were actually not one of the companies that were doing a lot of remote work, just because the day-to-day interactions and everything that we're doing, as far as our brand and different strategies that we need to discuss, it's just so much easier and better for us, at least, to do that in person. So again, historically, we've not, like, that was something that was a learning curve and a challenge for us to kind of get ramped up on that. But we're there, like, we're doing a good job. Everyone's like plugged in, and we've got all our remote working tools in place. And it just took a couple of weeks to get in that routine, but we're in it now. So I think from a future state perspective, this has definitely helped us kind of figure out what happens in a disaster sort of a situation, and what do we need to do to better plan
Sort of
for.
trial by fire.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've started a disaster recovery business continuity document based on this, and like, COVID is stress testing that plan. That's for sure. So I think that's one of the biggest takeaways in terms of like, how do we kind of make some changes and improve moving forward. Getting a lot of these systems and processes in place so that if something like this ever happens with any other disaster, maybe the office gets flooded with water, whatever, right? Like, at least we should just be able to execute the plan based on this.
Sure, sure. I wonder, just in terms of final sort of thoughts about the future of e-commerce. It's fantastic that you and the business have been able to adapt, and the timing has worked out incredibly well. Um, is this an opportunity you think for you to, are you leaning into this moment and investing more? Are there some things you can share about, what do you feel about overall e-commerce and how's consumer behavior going to change? Just love to get your final thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll talk about us in a minute, but in a broader sense, I definitely feel like this is now yet another yet another reason for merchants to get online, and in fact be more so online than having that offline physical presence. Uh, so that's right off the bat, and the trends have already shown, right? Like that's already the case. I mean, retail shops have been closing down regardless of COVID. So this just kind of further solidifies that, and hopefully merchants can kind of take away from this in terms of like, okay, we need to focus on online more than ever before. Outside of that, I think there's like trend-wise, I feel like there's definitely going to be a massive trend and spike in just uh, you know supplies for hospitals and any of these like sort of like shortages that we're seeing in medical supplies right now. I feel there's a whole nother sector that is spun up right now in terms of people pivoting and offering these sort of supplies, medical supplies, gloves, masks, those sort of things. So I think there's something there in terms of like, if you
Oh
can,
yeah, yeah.
if you can manage to pivot,
When
then
you get
try it.
a Yeah, when you get a chance, check out the video we just did. Actually, it goes up in a few days here. A veteran entrepreneur, she spun up. She added buttons to these headbands so that you can be. It's more convenient for you to wear a face mask, and you're not sort of shredding the back of your
Right.
ears. Just creativity, incredible, incredible. But yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
creativity at
There's going to
a
be a lot of innovation there.
That's right. That's right. Any other thoughts, Vishal, on what you're seeing for your business in the future?
For us, I mean, we're like, I feel like we just entered our next phase with the rebrand. One thing that I'm also excited about in terms of, I shouldn't say excited, but essentially, the fact that we've already expanded our target audience, in terms of the age group, and then in terms of the demographic, I think that's exciting. But then just with everything that's going on right now, the other thing that I see happening is that people are a lot more conscious about just hygiene in general, and that's also caused another spike in our business, because now people are adding shoe cleaning to their normal hygiene ritual,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I mean, obviously it's not like we're curing COVID or anything of that, but you're being so much more careful about every single touch point,
That's
right?
right.
Like you're wearing gloves, you're wearing masks. Well, what about your feet? That's touching all that stuff on the floor.
Yeah.
And
So
so we've definitely
capitalizing on the
seen,
tailwinds. Yeah, certainly.
yeah, we're definitely seeing that being a trend in terms of like, the audience, where it's like, okay, even if they're not sneakerheads, or, they don't necessarily care about their shoes from a, looking good perspective, they just want to clean them. And obviously our products allow people to do that, to make sure that, they're adding that into their normal, washing clothes, shoe cleaning rituals.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Well, Vishal, this has been, I think, one of our most professional 30 minutes ever. We're going to try
Yes,
to keep
sir.
it that way. And your business is thriving in what's a very, very difficult situation. And our thoughts and prayers to all the frontline workers and to all of those retail businesses who are going through a really, really tough time right now. I hope this conversation was really able to provide some insights on them, because there is opportunity out there. There is
Yeah,
consumer
absolutely.
demand, even in a variety of different categories. And I think entrepreneurs and creative thinkers like yourself, who can really find opportunity at these difficult times, is what's going to carry this economy forward. So I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Good luck with your business, and we'll hopefully hear back from you in the near future about how you've been able to beat the crisis. And thanks again, Vishal, for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Parag. Appreciate it. And if anybody needs any help or assistance that I can provide, happy to do so. So, obviously
Excellent.
you have my contact info, so feel free to forward that to anybody that I can help.